We've met our next guest on the shift before. His name is Jose Figueroa. He's lived in Canada for 16 years. His children born here. His wife staying a Canadian. And yet he is under threat of deportation from this country for reasons that are very difficult to understand. He has recently won a stay of his deportation order because he has had to take, over the last little while, refuge in the Walnut Grove Lutheran Church. Jose Figueroa joining us now. Hello, Jose. How are you?
Well, a little bit happy, but the same with a little bit of stress. Still here. Yeah, still here at the church.
Okay. That was going to be one of the questions I asked. So, Jose, what does this stay of deportation actually mean?
Well, what it meant is, CBSA, they were moving forward to actually get me out of Canada on October 31st.
Yes.
That's what moved me to get into sanctuary. And, what it was done yesterday with the stay of deportation is that we got from the federal court a deferral of the deportation until a hearing that it has been set for January 15th is done. The hearing is for the judicial review application that we have filed just recently. So that's what is happening. They cannot deport me now until all these legal processes are done.
Okay, now you mentioned the CBSA, and they've had an arrest warrant out for you since the last hearing, and that is why you ended up in the Walnut Grove Church. Does that get lifted as well, this arrest warrant?
No. Actually, at this point right now, there's a patrol of the CBSA outside the church waiting to carry out an arrest in the event I get out of the church.
So, Jose, what would they do? Would they keep you in custody then until the hearing in January?
Well, that's my fear. If I leave the church, they will put me into a detention center or something, and then, one of the reasons why I came into the sanctuary is because if I was deported to El Salvador, I am sure that I was not going to be seeing my family again.
Yes.
And I would be separated from them. So at this point, if they do that, then they will be doing the same. They will be split at the family, and they will be, the conditions wouldn't be the same.
Well, and I guess what I don't understand why the arrest warrant, and I'm sure you don't understand this as well, is you've proven that you're not a risk to leave the country because you can't leave the country. So what would be the reason that the CBS would want to put you in custody until January?
Well, that's the thing that we need to negotiate with CBSA. And actually, these are decisions that are coming from somewhere up there, from either the minister. And, this doesn't make any sense. Just recently, yesterday, in an interview from CBC in the morning, the reporter said that he had asked the Minister of Public Safety concerning the FMLN. The Minister of Public Safety has said yesterday and that the FMLN is not on the list of entities. I am not on the list of entities. Then my question is, why isn't the Minister of Public Safety granting the exemption? He hasn't given a response on that yet.
Now, Jose, we have to catch people up again in case they missed our last conversation. The FMLN, sorry, excuse me. Explain what they are and how they fit in to El Salvador and Salvadoran history.
The FMLN was the group that was fighting a dictatorship in the decade of the 80s. And as people would know if they check on the history books.
Yes.
The dictatorship that was being backed up by the United States of America was using death squads in order to repress the population. Groups like the student unions that I belong to. Well, we were constantly being abused and repressed by this regime. Many of my classmates at the student unions were kidnapped or were captured or were murdered by the death squads during the time of the Civil War. And that's what many people from El Salvador, members of different organizations, they were supportive of the FMLN because that was the only force that was getting between the death squads of the Salvadorian government of that time and the needs for justice of the community, of the Salvadorians.
Jose, you were part of the student arm of that. You weren't involved in any direct conflict. The FMLN now forms government in El Salvador. You mentioned that the minister, the FMLN is not on any list of organizations that Canada feels have any involvement in terrorism. And yet the Crown, if I understand this right, on Tuesday was arguing that no irreparable harm would come to you if you returned to El Salvador. And that's the reason now for deporting you. How many different reasons have you heard during this process over the last number of years from the government to have you deported?
No. The reason they are deporting me is because according to the immigration law, the Section 34.1 of the IRPA, I am inadmissible because I was a member of the FMLN. And according to a CBSA officer, and I have to point that out, the opinion of a CBSA officer, the FMLN is a terrorist organization.
But how is that possible when the minister has said, in at least one interview, that they aren't on any recognized list of terrorist organizations for Canada?
Well, I tell you, Mike, the FMLN is not even on any international list of terrorist organizations. It's not.
Jose.
So then the question is, this question is a question that has to be addressed to CBSA officers and to the Minister of Public Safety himself.
So does all this stem from one officer within the CBSA, from their opinion?
Just that this is an opinion from a CBSA officer. The IRPA on Section 44, that's when they make this a report to the minister. It gives a CBSA officer so much discretion to decide. And actually, if you look at this, a CBSA officer has more power than the minister himself.
Yeah.
He is like a screen. Nothing goes through to the minister if he doesn't go through this guy. And we have cases where CBSA officers here in Vancouver and CBSA officers in Toronto concerning members of FMLN have arrived to different opinions.
Right.
So doesn't it make any sense?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's why we keep talking to you, because this story it's hard to wrap your head around. So does this give you hope, this stay of deportation until January, does this give you hope that your story is being heard and that you'll have a hearing on the 15th that will give you a chance at least to maintain your identity as a Canadian?
Well, this actually yesterday, it was the happiest thing that ever happened to the family or during all these years, because there is the opportunity to clarify all of this situation. And, I am not a terrorist. I am here in Canada, and I have been here in Canada legally since 1997.
Yeah.
Immigration knew about my membership with FMLN since day one. And they didn't bring these allegations until 13 years after. I didn't know about this until 2010. So, this doesn't make sense. They are talking about the immigration law is to protect Canadians against terrorism, but yet they never brought these issues before. And besides, here in Canada, there are more than 150,000 Salvadorians. Many of them are or were members of FMLN and are Canadian citizens. So does this make any sense?
No, Jose, you can't. The only statement I can make in this is if it's a law, you can't have it interpreted by individuals as they're making a case-by-case decision. That's not how the law works. The law is applied equally to all people, and it's not allowed to be interpreted by one CBSA agent that causes this amount of
well,
chaos.
but that's the case. It is happening. There are many cases of not only members of FMLN, but members of some other organizations from other countries that have been found inadmissible under the same concept of the law.
Well, Jose, interesting to talk to you as always. We're following the story closely, and I think we're going to try and move up the chain and maybe talk to someone in government as well, and try and get an answer before this even gets to the hearing on the 15th.
Well, yes, actually, the Minister of Public Safety, he is the one that can end up this thing today. He doesn't. We went through this. We presented a ministerial relief that we had to hand it in to a CBSA officer who is to give a recommendation to the minister, and the minister then he uses his discretion. But so happens that who are bringing these allegations? These are CBSA officers, and they are ill-informed about the reality of El Salvador.
Yeah, and if they don't know, how do they form a proper opinion? Jose, thank you for your time again today. We really appreciate it.
No, thank you for you, Mike. And, well, I am here, and you can call me anytime.
Excellent. Thank you, Jose. My best to you and your family.
Yeah, thank you too.
And here, unfortunately, is him taking refuge in a church. So that's what here is for him. Someone who's lived in Canada for 16 years and one border agent. And let me say, I have had nothing but positive experiences with CBSA agents. You don't hear about a lot of these cases, but there's something wrong with the system where one person can cause this much drama based on an opinion that isn't even backed up by the government. So the government doesn't, we talked about this, the government doesn't recognize FMLN as a terrorist organization. It's not on any list. Nobody has it listed. It's a legitimate political party in El Salvador. Even when it was involved in the Civil War, Jose was part of the student arm of it that was involved in protests only. Non-violent. It's easy to document. It's been proven. And the CBSA is saying that it wouldn't do irreparable harm to send him back to El Salvador. Well, what's your definition of irreparable harm? It removes him from his family and his Canadian children, where they grew up. That sounds like irreparable harm to me. To rip a man away from his family? That sounds like irreparable harm. That is a very poor argument for kicking someone out of your country that has done absolutely nothing wrong, not only in their time here, but certainly from all the evidence that I've seen or heard in his time in El Salvador as well. We have some breaking news. Are we going?
And we support that with all our hearts. And so I would say to our ministers, the Minister of Immigration, the Minister of Public Safety especially, because these are the two that have the authority to make these decisions. In the words of a great theologian, let's make it right.